Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, everybody. If you just joined us recently and you didn't hear Margosia, we will have you muted and the camera's off. We have quite a few folks tonight. Thanks, Margosia. And if you do have any questions that come up tonight, feel free to use the chat and we'll try to either get to some of them right away during the program, or we will have some time at the end for question and answers with Tim. So yeah, thanks so much for being here. This is our first program of this season. Whitefish Legacy Partners is hosting Tim Manley of Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. So we're very honored to have him. And before we get going, I'll just tell you, for anybody who's new to Whitefish Legacy Partners, you might know the Whitefish Trail. We maintain over 43 miles and growing of trails to recreate on. We help work with partners to conserve green space around the community. And we also do education. So we have a lot of free programs that are coming up. If you want to check out what we do or what we have coming up or how to get involved or how to help support us, just visit us at www.whitefishlegacy.org. And before we get going, my name's Christiane and I'm the education coordinator with Whitefish Legacy Partners. And we're so honored and thrilled to have you here. So we're going to introduce Tim and we'll kick it off and I'll let you know a little bit about him before he speaks. He was born in Great Falls, Montana and lived in Missoula and Butte before his family moved to Fort Collins, Colorado. He graduated from Colorado State University with a bachelor's in wildlife biology. He moved back to Montana in 1981 and began work with the Kootenai National Forest, mapping grizzly bear habitat in the summer and cruising timber in the winter. He began working on grizzly bears in 1984 when he worked on the Cabinet Yaak Grizzly Bear Project. From 1988 to 1992, he worked on the South Fork Grizzly Bear Project as the habitat biologist. In 1993, Tim was selected to fill the newly created Grizzly Bear Management position for Region 1. The area he covers includes a large portion of northwest Montana within and adjacent to the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, which includes much of the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex. So thank you, Tim, for being here with your expertise, your experience, and your stories, and we can't wait to learn from you. So we'll take it away.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invite and hello to everybody. And can you hear me okay? Like I was introduced, I work for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and I do the grizzly bear management for the state. And what I wanted to do tonight was just give you an overview of some of the grizzly bear management work that I'm involved with and show you a little bit about grizzly bear identification, how to identify black bears and grizzly bears, especially important with hunting season coming up starting in a couple of days, black bear hunting season. And also going to talk a little bit about grizzly bear habitat and then get into some of the conflict management, prevention management that we do. And I also, because this is Whitefish Legacy Partners, I wanted to concentrate on recreation and talking about hiking, mountain biking, recreating safely in grizzly bear country and give you some information on that. And then I think we're going to go ahead and have questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and as long as all the video works, everything should work fine. Like I said, I work for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks and do the grizzly bear management, and this is my technician, Justine Valiers. She works with me. This will be her fourth year actually working for me. And last year was really a challenge with the COVID and our requirement to be masked. We were considered essential, so we worked all the time and tried to do it as safely as possible, responding to conflicts with bears, going to people's houses, talking with people. So it was still a bit different. We canceled most of our in-person events that we did in terms of presentations. We usually, do one with Whitefish Legacy Partners, and I prefer to do events in person. It's just easier to communicate with people that way, get to know people. So hopefully in the future, we'll be doing those again. Just to bring everybody up to speed a little bit, in 1983, grizzly bears were basically voted by Montana school kids as the state animal for Montana. And not a lot of people know that, but like the meadowlark is the state bird, the bitterroot is the state flower, the grizzly bear is the state animal for Montana. And you can see that quite a few votes for grizzly bears, and the second was elk. So it's a pretty popular animal in Montana, not just with residents of Montana, but people that come to visit the state. So this is the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. It basically goes from the Canadian border to the north, all the way down to basically Highway 200, Lincoln, Ovando area, and down into the Rattlesnake Wilderness area. And then it goes from basically Highway 93 and the Mission Mountains and the Mission Valley on the west over to the Rocky Mountain front, essentially Browning and Choteau, Augusta, that area, and down to Lincoln on the south end. And of this area, this is how much of the area that I cover. And so I basically have the Whitefish Range, North Fork of the Flathead, South Fork of the Flathead, Middle Fork, the Swan Valley, most of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, Great Bear Wilderness, and part of the Mission Mountain Wilderness. So a lot of the area that I work in is adjacent to Glacier National Park, and I don't work in Glacier unless they request that we come in and work with them. We do have bears that, of course, go in and out of the park, and so we kind of share monitoring of those bears when they do that. So it's a big chunk of country. Unfortunately, I don't get to spend as much time in the Bob Marshall and the wilderness as I would like. Most of my time is spent in the front country because that's where the majority of the conflicts occur, and most of that's on private land. The grizzly bears are currently listed as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. Kate Kendall with the U.S. Geological Survey in 2004, they did the population estimate using DNA from hair snags that they got throughout the ecosystem, and came up with a population estimate of about 765 grizzly bears in 2004. And plus or minus, there's some confidence interval around that. And then at the same time in 2004, Fish, Wildlife and Parks and the other agencies started a population trend monitoring program to see if the population was going up or down. And Cecily Costello is overseeing that with Fish, Wildlife and Parks now, because Rick Mace retired. And essentially the annual growth rate on the grizzly bear population is about 2.3% a year. So we figure there's up around 1,100 grizzly bears from the original population estimate of 765 back in 2004. So the population has been increasing. So what I'm going to go through is very briefly, quickly, bear identification. How do you tell black bears from grizzly bears? Grizzly bear habitat, where they're at different times of the year, what kind of foods they prefer. And then grizzly bear management. That's primarily what I deal with. Prevention is what we try to push in terms of keeping conflicts from occurring, but also needing to respond to conflicts once they do occur. And like I mentioned earlier, because of the Whitefish Legacy Partners and recreation, I'm going to concentrate on recreating in grizzly bear country. So grizzly bear or black bear. Just some of the characteristics that I look for. Grizzly bears have long claws for digging primarily. They're basically as long as your fingers, and they have more rounded ears than black bears do. They have a big, round, broad head. They have light tipped guard fur, which gives them that grizzled appearance. Most of them have a distinct shoulder hump over their shoulders. They're more multicolored usually, I guess you could say, than black bears. Black bears are usually pretty much black or brown or blonde, whereas grizzlies have a lot of different shading throughout their coat color. And I think it's a lot harder to spot grizzly bears when we're radio tracking from the air than it is black bears. They just don't seem to stand out as much. Another thing that I tend to look for with grizzly bears is, and I'll show it on some other pictures better, is what I call light saddle stripe. And it's basically a light colored band right behind their front shoulder. And not all grizzly bears have that, but I've not seen black bears with it. The other thing is distinctive with black bears is they've got, usually the black bears in this area have a chest blaze, a white chest blaze, and we don't see that on the grizzly bears. So just some of the characteristics that we look for. Also, grizzly bears tend to have more of a dish-chin shape profile in the forehead, whereas grizzly bears have more of a straight profile from the forehead down to the nose. And I'll point some of those out as we go through some of the photos. So grizzly bears, their front claws, like I said, usually are as long as your fingers. They do a lot of digging. And it seems like some of the older bears tend to have lighter colored claws. And some of the younger bears, their claws tend to be a little bit darker. That's not always the case, but as you'll see in some of the pictures, actually, when a bear will stand up on its hind legs, a lot of times you can see those light colored long claws. And because of the long claws on the front foot, they show up pretty well in the tracks in front of the toe pads, and they're usually at least 1.5 inches in front of the toe pad. So if you do have a bear track, you can measure the distance between the front of the toe all the way to the toe, to where the claw mark is. And usually that's at least 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches long. The other thing that I've noticed with grizzly bears and black bears in northwest Montana is most black bear front tracks, the width across the front track is, with black bears, it's usually less than 5 inches across. And grizzly bears, anything over 5 inches across in this area is probably going to be a grizzly bear front track. And the same with the hind track. Usually the width is the same as the width of the front track. And anything over 6 inches on the west side of the divide is very likely an adult male grizzly bear. The female grizzly bears are usually 5 to 5 3/4 inches wide, and adult male grizzly bear tracks are usually over 6 inches wide. The hind foot is distinctly shaped. Grizzly bear's hind foot is very triangular shape, and you'll notice that it does not have an indentation like a black bear does over here. The black bear has usually an indentation that has hair growing in it, and you can see over here on the left-hand side, the grizzly bears don't have that. So that's another characteristic to look for. And also the claws on the back feet are essentially the same length as they are on a black bear as they are in a grizzly. This slide I like to show because it shows how much differently a grizzly bear, the same bear, can look during the same year at different times of the year. So on the left-hand side, that grizzly, this is a 4-year-old female grizzly bear in the North Fork of the Flathead that we had captured. And the picture on the left is in June, 1st of June, and she weighed 200 pounds. And the 4th of October, we recaptured her, and you can see how much different she looked. She basically grew in a new winter coat. She looks totally different color-wise. She gained 100 pounds. So she was 300 pounds on the right versus 200 on the left. So we get a lot of people, that see grizzly bears and that live in certain areas, and they'll say, well, I saw 6 different grizzly bears in my backyard, go through my backyard through the course of the year, and they may or may not have been the same bear. And so sometimes it can be very difficult to tell whether you're looking at the same bear or not at different times of the year. So we're going to go through a little bit on seeing how you do on bear identification. This is a black bear slide I borrowed from somebody that took a picture of this family group of black bears in Glacier Park. And you can see just with this female black bear, you got colors ranging from kind of cinnamon color to light blonde color to darker brown color. And we can see the same thing with grizzly bears. And so as I go through the slides, just, think, I'll give you a few seconds to look at the picture, and then I'll go ahead and say what it is. Usually in person, I quiz people on it, but with this, we'll just go ahead. So this bear, pretty characteristic here. You can see the big round broad head, the rounded ears, and the distinct shoulder hump on it. grizzly bear. It's an adult male. This is a black bear, basically a brown or phase or cinnamon color black bear. Black bears also have typically a real tan muzzle by their nose. And we don't really see that tan coloration distinct in grizzly bears as we do with black bears. And this black bear has big long ears. And we get a lot of people calling us, telling us that they've had grizzly bears, and then we'll look at pictures they've taken and they turn out to be brown colored black bears. A lot of overlap and common mistaken identity there. This bear is a grizzly bear. This is a young female up the North Fork. You can see she does have the shoulder hump and she's got the rounded ears. You don't see a real tan colored muzzle on the face. This is a grizzly bear. You can actually see the claws of the bear standing up. This happened to be a subadult male grizzly bear. Rounded ears again. Big round head. This is a black bear. No distinct shoulder hump on it. Kind of, you can see more on the side of the face profile. It's more of a straight face profile rather than a dished in shape. Pretty much all one uniform coloration to monochrome color, black. This is an infrared trail camera photo at night. This one's pretty easy. This female grizzly with a cub. And you can see when she's standing up, you can see how light colored those claws are. They can really stick out. Really rounded ears. You can see the grizzled hair on the side of her. Give her that light, shiny appearance. This one's a little more difficult. This is actually a grizzly bear, young big bear, shedding out in the spring, in the summer months. Can't really see its head, so it's not really a good way. You can't see its claws at all, but you can see that there's somewhat of a shoulder hump, and you can see kind of a light colored stripe behind the front shoulder. This one a lot of people can miss. It's got the big round broad head. It's got the rounded ears, and it doesn't look like it has much of a shoulder hump, but this is a grizzly bear. This is an adult male grizzly bear. And you can see that it's not really a monochrome color. It's kind of dark patches, light color throughout the coat. See a little bit of a shoulder stripe right here behind the front shoulder. I like to put this one in because it's a little tricky. This is actually an albino black bear. We had a call that there was a white colored grizzly bear up near Olney, and we went up there and set a trap and actually captured this young male black bear. It was an albino, first one that I had ever captured before. This is a grizzly bear, very distinct shoulder hump. And this is probably one of the darkest grizzly bears I've seen, almost black in color. This is up Grave Creek up out of Eureka area, taken by a landowner. But again, you can see more of a dished in shape on it, or rounded ears, big round broad head, and a very distinct shoulder hump. There's two bears in this picture. They're both grizzly bears, of course. The front one is a big adult male, and the one in the back is a female. And you can see the light tip guard hairs on this big adult male. Not much of a shoulder hump, based probably on the profile of it. We never did catch this bear. My guess is probably easily 400, maybe 500 pounds. That female in the background was about a 225, 250 pound bear. And this is the last one. Again, very easy to tell. You can see the light colored claws on this bear. And this was actually a photo taken by a landowner over at Marion Lake, or not Marion Lake, McGregor Lake over west of Calves. We don't typically get grizzly bears over there, but with bears starting to inhabit historical range, we are getting more reports of grizzlies over in the Salish Range in the area between the Cabinet Yaak, Libby area, and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. So why is being able to identify grizzly bears important? to differentiate between black and grizzly bears. Well, this was an adult male grizzly bear that was shot during spring black bear season down the Swan Valley several years ago. Some out-of-state hunters from Pennsylvania had taken the bear ID quiz to be able to get a black bear hunting license, and watched this grizzly bear walking down the road towards them. Watched it for quite a while. Thought, wow, that's the biggest black bear I've ever seen. Ended up shooting and killing it. Walked up to it and realized that it was a grizzly bear. Called us. We called law enforcement in, and he was sighted. But again, you know, it's really important if people are hunting black bears to be able to differentiate between grizzly bears and black bears, so we don't have this type of mistaken identity happening. Going to touch briefly on grizzly bear habitat. I like to talk about this because it's kind of this time of the year, bears are coming out of their dens, and I just wanted people to learn a little bit more about where bears are at different times of the year. The ecosystems up here depend a lot on wildfire, and a lot of the wildfire has been replaced with timber harvest, which in some cases does produce good grizzly bear foods with huckleberry shrub fields, but also increases human access into some of those areas. And there's been some concern about human access into some places that grizzly bears need for secure habitat. But wildfires basically formed a lot of the ecosystems, the huckleberry shrub fields and the serviceberry fields that bears depend on for foraging in during especially the summer months are really fire dependent and are open canopies. And so very important part of the ecosystem up here. So what are bears doing right now? Well, they're starting to emerge. We consider April the time that most bears are coming out of their dens. We get a few bears that come out in mid-March, usually adult males, but most of the bears are coming out right now. In fact, I had a couple more radio-collared grizzly bears poke their heads out of their dens today when I checked on their GPS collars. And around here, most of our grizzly bear dens are at high elevation, usually above 6,000 feet, usually on steep slopes, 60% plus slopes. And they can be on all different kinds of aspects, north, south, east, or west. They used to think that grizzlies usually just denned on north aspects, but we find them denning on all different aspects. This is a grizzly bear den. You can see where a bear had come out and gone back into the den. When they come out in the spring, they usually spend, a week to 2 weeks around the den before they start moving away and looking for something to forage on.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
I was going to interrupt you real quick because I saw that there was a couple questions that related to hibernation. I don't know if you saw them. The only two questions I think we've had, one said, what makes them come out of hibernation? And one asked, are they really truly hibernating? I've heard they can wake up, sort of question.
Okay, sure. I can answer that. What makes them come out of hibernation? That's a good question. I think an internal clock is my best guess on that, because some bears where they den, maybe the snow will melt and the water starts dripping in, but a lot of our bears den above 6,000 feet, and there's not a lot of snow melt going on in the middle of March or the first part of April up there. And they're dug into the side of the hill, and they're under 10 or 12 feet of snow. So how they know when to come out, I think it just may be something to do with an internal clock. They may come out a little earlier, maybe if they're hungry and not in good physical shape. But it is amazing to me, we'll have bears, same radio collared bear, come out within 2 or 3 days from year to year. And I know they're digging out through 10 or 12 feet of snow, and how they do it, I'm not exactly sure. The other question, let's see, what was that one about? Oh, true hibernators. They do hibernate, but they can wake up. They're not like a ground squirrel that basically goes into a very deep hibernation. And so they do go into hibernation. Some people just call it torpor. Some people basically say it's false hibernation, but it is actually termed hibernation, where they basically go into their dens. They don't eat, they don't defecate, urinate, they live off their body fat. The respiration decreases, their temperature decreases. But what's interesting is the females will actually give birth in the dens. They can wake up. They do wake up. We've actually put cameras in man-made dens of orphan black bear cubs that we put out back into the wild, and have seen that they'll wake up in the middle of the winter, move around, reposition themselves. We even saw video footage of a mouse going into the den of a black bear, and that woke it up. And so they can wake up, but they are considered hibernators, but it's not a true deep hibernation. So this is the time of the year that we'll get in the helicopter or fixed wing and fly looking for grizzly bear den sites of radio colored bears to get a count on the cubs when they first come out of the den. We want to look at reproduction, cub litter size, and that way, as we follow this female grizzly bear through the year, you can see which cubs, how many cubs survive, and how many cubs make it to going back in the den with the female again during the winter. They basically keep their cubs until they're 2 years old, 2.5 years old, and then they'll kick them out. Whereas black bears usually kick their cubs out after 1.5 years. So we're going to start doing flights, hopefully maybe the end of this week, first start of next week, to get up and get visuals on some of these bears as they come out of the dens, especially females with cubs, to see how many cubs they have. Here's some more video footage. I'll talk a little bit more about the helicopter that we're flying in. But this female, she had 2 cubs of the year with her. And this is an older female. I've had her radio collared a couple of times. First caught her as a 2-year-old outside of Big Fork in an orchard, but she actually has established a home range over on the east side of Hungry Horse Reservoir. And she's, I think, probably around 22, 23 years old now. And she's still producing cubs. She's not radio collared anymore. This was back in 2014, but she did produce cubs that year. This is what a den looks like. And like I said, how did they know? They dug out, through 10 or 12 feet of snow. This is up in Jewel Basin. This is a female grizzly bear. She has 1 cub of the year with her. And I guess it wasn't walking fast enough. She picked it up to carry it. So some of the video footage that you saw was from Two Bear Air Rescue. I just want to mention them, give them a shout out and thanks. They have been very helpful and generous in providing us with the helicopter support and radio tracking and monitoring some of these bears. And the camera that you can see that's mounted on the bottom of the helicopter is a daytime and infrared camera for nighttime, or it can detect heat. And what I wanted to do was give an example of how much an advantage it is for radio tracking bears and trying to see bears and be able to count the cubs in thick brush or trees that normally we wouldn't be able to see without the aid of the infrared. So this is a female with 2 yearlings up in the Eureka area, Pinkham Creek. And this is the infrared camera during the day. You can even see the heat signatures from their tracks. And then it's going to switch to daylight, and you can see the difference of not being able to see as well down through the tree canopy. So a big advantage. And so when we're flying the dens, also this is up in the Whitefish range. And we're going to zoom in here in a minute. And we're about 1/2 mile away from this, so we're not really close to the dens. It has a great zoom lens on the camera. And this is a daytime picture on the left, daylight, and infrared on the right. And you can actually see the heat signatures from the bears inside the den on the right. And this is a female grizzly, and she had actually 2 cubs with her. You can see their ears inside of that. So it's kind of neat with the technology. It's occasionally available to us. We can actually get an idea whether they still have their cubs or not, even when they're in the den. So what do the dens look like? Most of the grizzly bear dens seem to be excavated. They dig them out. That's where those log and claws come in handy. And if you climbed inside the den, turned around, Eric Peterson I'll talk a little bit more about. Took this photo up in Glacier Park. It's up on the garden wall looking over towards Oberlin. And you can see they're pretty sizable, roomy. They usually, this is another den down the Swan. Eric Peterson and Mark Ruby went in and picked up a dropped radio collar from a male grizzly for me several years ago. They'll line the bottom of the den, kind of a nest, either subalpine fir boughs or bear grass or other grasses that they can find and take in to lay on. But again, pretty sizable. Sometimes we'll have them where they'll use natural rock cavities or caves, but I would say the majority of the dens are dug in this area. So springtime, basically I consider that once all the bears have come out of the den, which is usually by the first part of May, and they start moving around and foraging. And some of the first stuff they're feeding on is just green vegetation. Bears do a lot of grazing, grass, dandelions, clover. The plant on the right is a real important bear food in the spring, and that's called cow parsnip. Grows in avalanche shoots and riparian stream bottoms. Has the big rhubarb looking leaves, not to be confused with devil's club, but they'll basically eat the flowers and the stalks all the way down to the ground. Spring is also the time where I start getting phone calls about grizzly bears being in people's yards because the yards are greening up. There's grass, there's clover. This is down in the Ferndale area, and this is a female grizzly with 3 young ones coming in, grazing on people's yards. And we'll talk a little bit more what I ask people to do when they have bears coming in around their homes. Another typical place to find grizzly bears in the spring are in the avalanche chutes and the right creek bottoms where there's a lot of moisture and things start to green up earlier. Pretty common to see bears out feeding in the avalanche chutes in the springtime. Spring is also breeding season, essentially May into July. The peak of breeding season is usually about the first or second week of June. This is a big adult male following a female grizzly bear over on the east side of the Flathead Valley on private land. And you can actually, on this male, you can see the light colored saddle stripe I was talking about that's behind the front shoulder there. Springtime is also the time that deer fawns and elk calves and moose calves are being born, and some bears have learned to hunt them efficiently right after they're born. Yellowstone is actually a place where people go down to watch the bears hunting elk calves in the open Lamar Valley down there. And basically up here, we do get food habits where bears have basically, fed on fawns and elk calves. Usually it's only for a week or so after they're born. After that, they can easily outrun bears. But they do actively hunt them during certain time, the springtime. And then we get into the summer. That's the berry season. That's essentially mid-July, and it goes to mid-September, maybe the first part of October. Buffalo berry on the right-hand side are some of the first berries to ripen up, and then followed by huckleberry and serviceberry, choke cherries, mountain ash is later in the fall. But the middle slide and the slide on the left, picture on the left, those are grizzly bears in huckleberry shrub fields. And the huckleberries in this area are probably one of the most important foods for grizzly bears in order to put on the weight that they need to survive the 6 months, 5-6 months that they're in the den. Another important food source for some bears are army cutworm moths. And Eric Peterson's a graduate student, and he's doing a master's project on grizzly bears feeding on army cutworm moths in Glacier National Park. And he just recently did a presentation on his research project for Swan Valley Connections. And if you go to their website, you can actually find the link. They recorded it like we're recording this presentation. It's really interesting. The moths migrate from the plains and from the intermountain valleys into the high talus scree slopes in Glacier Park. They feed on the nectar, the alpine flowers at night, and then during the day they go into these high elevation talus slopes where it's nice and cool. They can metabolize the nectar that they've fed on at night, and the grizzly bears have learned that, and they'll go in and dig those moths out And Eric calls them just little flying pieces of butter, basically, I guess you could say, because they did a energy comparison between a moth, a dried moth, and the same amount of butter. And it turns out that the fat content and the energy content in a moth is basically the same as butter. And so they're just really high in fat content and really nutritious. And these bears in the fall, to get the fat, they need to eat up to 20,000 calories a day. And so it's a real important food source. And he's trying to learn where these places are in Glacier Park and other areas throughout the eventually Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. And then after the berries have dropped off, we get those hard frosts, usually Labor Day or after Labor Day. Bears start switching diets. They do a lot more digging for glacier lily bulbs, biscuit root, and then also start feeding on more persistent berries like mountain ash, which is the scat picture on the right-hand side. And then also they'll do a lot of looking for, during the hunting season, gut piles from hunter-killed animals. So that's an overview of basically habitat use by grizzly bears up in this area. And now we're going to talk more about what I'm mostly involved with is the grizzly bear management. And this is my technician, Justine. We caught this female grizzly bear cub up in the Fort Tyne area, and we're transferring her from one trap into another trap. And what we're trying to prevent is what you see in the lower right-hand or the right-hand side, and that's a grizzly bear inside, broke into a storage trailer, camp trailer, to get bread and cat food that was stored in there, busted the window and went out. So that's what we're trying to prevent. We don't want bears getting to the position of doing that because our options are really limited in how we deal with those bears. So what are our goals? Basically, it's to minimize conflict between people and grizzly bears. We want to keep people safe. We want to minimize property damage and damage or depredations to livestock. And we want to try to keep bears alive, out of trouble, and in the wild. And you can see that this bear is on these people's porch because it was getting a hummingbird feeder. Bears are really good at finding foods that we tend to leave out, and we'll talk about some of those. So one of the objectives is to minimize grizzly bear conflicts by working with the landowners to identify and secure attractants. And people have a lot of different ways of storing attractants, storing garbage. And so we try to work with the people to try to show them how they can do it so bears can't come in and get into stuff. One of the more popular things that we use is electric fencing. This is a temporary net fencing you can get at any of the hardware stores around here. And it's in big rolls. You can roll it out, different sizes, hook up a fence energizer to it. And basically we put this around a chicken coop up south of Eureka that grizzly bears have been getting into. It's a temporary situation. Snow will knock these fences down. They require more maintenance, but pretty quick and easy to put up to take care of a problem that's ongoing. We prefer it when people will put up permanent electric fencing, and there's some cost share programs, Defenders of Wildlife. If you go to their website, on the Missoula website for Defenders of Wildlife, they have cost share programs. Wildlife Services also will help with some electric fencing, especially of livestock. And then our department, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, will provide people with information and assistance in putting up and maintaining properly structured electric fencing. It can be very effective in keeping bears out. So this video shows you a bear reacting to getting shocked by touching its nose to a screen of a window on a chicken coop. And we've gone to, instead of just putting fencing around places, we've actually gone to putting up screen where it's insulated from the ground and actually electrifying the screen with electric fence energizer. Here's a video of a female grizzly with 2 yearlings that had been getting into this man door, into a garage, to get cat food and horse feed. And we electrified the door because the door was metal. And so we hooked a fence energizer to that. And you can see when she came and touched that with her nose, she got shocked and left. So you can be pretty inventive in terms of, how you protect attractants or secure attractants with electric fence energizers. Here was something a little bit new for us this year. This was in the Flathead Valley along the Flathead River. We had a grizzly bear that was getting into these grain silos that were storing seed, wheat seed or barley seed for planting, and they would bend the metal doors. So what we did was we got some wooden pallets, we stapled some chicken wire to it, or screen, and then we hooked a fence energizer, this over here on the left-hand side, solar fence energizer to it and hooked them all together. And basically, if a bear came and stepped on that, it would get shocked with about 8,000 volts. And the video that was at the bottom showed a white-tailed deer buck getting shocked when it touched it with its nose, and then also showed that the grizzly bear showed up around it. We never got video of it getting shocked, but the bear never got back into the grain silos and ended up finally leaving. So it can be very effective. I actually installed something like this on a porch down south of Condon yesterday, where a grizzly bear was getting into a freezer that was on an outdoor porch, and there's no place to move the freezer to. So I put one of these up. The bear came back last night and obviously didn't get to the freezer and ended up leaving. This is a critter getter. It's a little noisemaker, works off motion, set up outside next to an apple tree outside of Columbia Falls last fall. Bears were coming in, getting into the apple trees. We asked people to pick their fruit if they have issues with bears coming in, getting into their fruit trees so they don't get the damage to the fruit trees. But the critter getters work as a temporary solution that can keep bears away. And then garbage. We deal a lot with bears getting into garbage. We have, these are called Kodiak cans and bearable bins. Kodiak bear resistant garbage bins we can loan out to people. We don't have a big supply of them, but we loan them out when we can. And actually the city of Whitefish is working with Republic Services to get Kodiak cans in for residents in the city of Whitefish so that you can store your garbage in a bear resistant manner. Because there is a city ordinance in Whitefish that you're not allowed to roll your garbage out till morning of pickup unless it's in a bear resistant container. The Whitefish City is working with Republic Services that hauls the garbage up there to get these into place. Some bear resistant containers that are out there on the market really may not be bear resistant. You can see this is up in the Eureka area, that this can, basically the bear was able to get into it. So we call them bear resistant. We don't call them bear proof. Another thing that's a big issue is illegal feeding of wildlife. In the state of Montana, it's illegal to knowingly feed deer, elk, moose, black bears, grizzly bears, and mountain lions. And this is one thing that a lot of people like wildlife to be around their homes, but feeding them is illegal and putting food out for them. And so some of the stores up here carry these deer blocks. It's not illegal for the stores to sell the deer blocks, but it's illegal for you to take it and put it out for wildlife. So we've requested that they not sell the deer blocks, but it's been a big moneymaker for them. It's hard for them to pull those from their shelves, but we don't want people being set up to doing something that's not legal, but also we don't want wildlife getting to the point where they become used to feeding around people's homes. And the middle picture is a grizzly bear feeding out of a bucket of corn that was set outside somebody's back porch for white-tailed deer. So you never know what you're going to end up attracting, and the best thing is not to put out food for wildlife. And then for bird feeders, we recommend that people take their bird feeders down the 1st of April. Don't put them up until the 1st of December. And instead of bird feeders, put out bird baths. They work great. And instead of putting up hummingbird feeders, to put out flowers, flowering baskets or hanging baskets of flowers. It will still attract the hummingbirds. You don't have to worry as much about the wasps and the ants getting into the feeders, cleaning them. It looks nice around the houses, and it's not going to attract the bears. So there's a lot of different options people can do to keep from attracting bears around their homes. Fruit is another big attractant for grizzly bears. A lot of people grow fruit in the Flathead Valley. And so we have a couple of pages that we created on Facebook. One is the Flathead Bearware Facebook page. It was created by my technician in 2020 in May, and we're already over 2,000 people that are liking it and following it. And it's just providing more information about living in bear country, and electric fencing, how to put up electric fencing, that kind of stuff, just informational. And then because of the amount of fruit that's in the valley, we also created a Flathead Fruit Gleaning Facebook page. And that was created in 2019. It hasn't been as popular as the Flathead Bearware page, but the idea there is to connect people that have fruit trees that can't pick their fruit or don't want to pick their fruit with people that want to pick fruit. And so, if you have fruit trees or you want to pick fruit in the fall, go pick, check out our Flathead Fruit Gleaning page. And it's a way for you to connect with people that either want to pick fruit or have their fruit picked. And I think it's going to help a lot in some of these places where we have bears coming in and destroying fruit trees because people aren't able to pick their fruit. I didn't advance. The other thing that objective is we work with the agencies to promote food storage on public lands and to minimize grizzly bear conflicts. And unfortunately, last year, there was a lot of people that were coming to Northwest Montana, and a lot of use. If you went down Hungry Horse Reservoir, people were camped everywhere on every little pullout. And unfortunately, people left a lot of garbage and trash out. And stuff like this that's left out, here's some steaks that were left out. Bears find that, that's how they can become food conditioned without even being around people's homes. This was a bear resistant dumpster that was put up near the Hungry Horse Dam and, was overflowing, and it actually wasn't even supposed to be put there. So we got it actually removed because it was just creating a big problem there. So again, working with the agencies, Forest Service does a great job. They have bear rangers that patrol, talk to people in the campgrounds to make sure that they're following food storage orders, and also spend time identifying and picking up places where people are throwing garbage out, which is very unfortunate. This is an example of up on Tally Lake Ranger District, where these dots over here are the locations of radio colored female grizzly bear that we had. And when we went in and checked out to see what was going on, we realized that there was an abandoned trailer there that people had been camping in, but had just thrown their garbage out the back of the trailer. So another situation where this female grizzly came in and was getting a food reward. Garbage people were just throwing out the back of the door of the trailer. Forest Service technicians, they came in and cleaned all that trash up. And I don't remember if they actually got the people to move the trailer or they had to tow the trailer because it ended up being abandoned. But again, another situation where sanitation on national forest lands can cause bears to become food conditioned. I also work a lot with the different counties, Flathead, Lake, Lincoln, and Missoula County. If you use the green box sites over by Quorum, you can see the chain link fence, but it has electric fence around the outside of it. Lincoln County, all these green sites, they've all been, have electric fencing around them now to keep bears from getting into them. So the counties have been very receptive to doing it, keeps their sites cleaner, keeps the bears out of the trash sites. We have been working more with Lake County down south of Ferndale and Swan Lake area. They've got some automated lids that we actually put on their 40 cubic yard dumpsters. This is actually down at Porcupine Creek south of Swan Lake. And we modified the dumpster lid so you could close it or open it hydraulically just by pushing a button. Problem was it started to malfunction or didn't close all the way, and this female grizzly bear with 2 cubs, these are her locations, came in and started using it. And I have to remind the county every year to get it functioning and operational. And when I came out of the Swan yesterday, I stopped in there and the lid was fully open. They haven't, put the battery in to open and close the lids, and they need to give them a call to get that taken care of. But it's been working really well for the last 15 years. They've adapted it or similar setup on their dumpsters down there out of Southwest Montana and over by Great Falls. area to keep black bears and grizzly bears in some places out of the dumpsters. So there's, again, automated lids, things that we can do. It's just a matter of maintenance and making sure that they're operating properly. Another objective is to provide information to the media on how people can minimize conflicts with bears. We've done some stuff with Jack Hanna. He's been very helpful. He has a house in the Flathead Valley that he comes to on occasion, and he's been a big supporter. We've done some fundraisers with him. He's recently retired, but we still keep in contact with him. And then this year, 60 Minutes came out and did some interviews about grizzly bear management. And the big thing is to educate the public on how to live and recreate safely in grizzly bear country. So I'm going to spend a little more time on this just because of the recreational aspect of it. So recreation is really getting big in Montana. People like to get out and recreate. There's a lot of public lands to recreate on. And, we want to get out there and we want to enjoy it and we want to do it safely. And recreating in grizzly bear country, you just need to be aware of some certain things. And that's why Whitefish Legacy Partners, likes to put on these presentations, and I like to participate just to give people more information about grizzly bears and make you more aware of when you're recreating bear country. So if you're hiking in Glacier National Park, you may expect to run into grizzly bears. You can actually run into them a lot of different areas, but it's not uncommon to see grizzly bears on or near the trails in Glacier National Park. That upper right-hand corner photo by Philip Granrud is actually the Highline Trail right there from Logan Pass. And a grizzly bear came along that, and there's a hiker on it. And you can see the hiker is actually right here, lower right-hand corner, where he had to get off the trail and the bear just ended up walking past him. So this is some video footage I borrowed from a person that filmed it in Glacier Park. I think it's probably the mini glacier, the trail up to Iceberg Lake. And it shows 3 young grizzly bears on the trail. And the people just basically got off the trail, sat quietly watching, they filmed this. And, whenever there's 3 young grizzly bears, or, grizzly bear, a young one running around, you can probably expect moms running around too. And she's not visible yet, but you'll see her come up onto the trail here shortly. So again, just being aware when you're hiking in bear country, make noise, carry bear spray, know how to use bear spray. There's very few negative instances where people have been injured or killed by bears. It's a very rare occurrence, but it does happen. And so people do need to be aware of that fact when you are hiking and recreating bear country. But when you're hiking, you're going slower and more chance to react to a bear. It gives the bear a chance to react to you, and you can stop quite easily. And so it's a little bit different than mountain biking. And there's a lot of new mountain bike trails that are being proposed and put into place that are both mountain bike and hiking trails. And when you're mountain biking, I just showed this video clip just to remind you, you're going at faster speed, you're not able to stop as quickly, and the result can be pretty bad. So that's up on Big Mountain. And so your reaction time, when you're mountain biking, isn't the same as when you're hiking. And this is in California, mountain biker. And he basically ran into the side of a black bear that was running across the trail. And in this case, the black bear just took off, ran away. Person wasn't injured, but there is a possibility with the grizzly bear reacting differently and being more defensive. So just to be aware that, when you're traveling fast on mountain bikes, going around corners, your sight distance could be limited and your reaction time is limited. The other thing I recommend is keep the bear spray on you, on your person, on a belt or something, because if Some people put the bear spray in their water bottle holder on their bike, and if you crash, as you saw in the videos, you get separated from your bike and separated from your bear spray if you needed it. And then hunting safely in bear country. There's a lot of brochures that are out. We have information on our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website about how to hunt safely in bear country. I'm not going to go into it in any depth here because there's a lot of information out there on it. But again, we do encourage, even if you are carrying a rifle or a handgun hunting, we do recommend that you also carry and know how to use bear spray. Because you don't always have your rifle or your handgun, your gun with you. A lot of people, you know, they'll shoot an elk, they'll gut it out, get the gut pile or the meat away from the gut pile, and then they'll take the antlers or whatever back to their truck, and they'll hike back in without their rifle, and they'll leave their rifle at their truck. And so, you know, have bear spray with you when you go back in those situations, or carry it all the time while you're hunting. It's a good idea. And this is a picture of a local resident, Columbia Falls. This was a few years ago, north of Columbia Falls. He was hunting and ended up getting close to a grizzly bear that was in a day bed. The bear basically charged at him, bit him on the foot. He didn't have any bear spray and suffered, you know, injury to his foot. Ended up to bear air and alert. And they ended up getting him out. And because of that instance, he's friends of my technician. We actually had him come and help us work up a grizzly bear the next year. So just he could have more positive experience with the bear rather than the negative experience that he encountered with the bear that did bite him. And then again, the food storage regulations, food storage orders, all the national forests and grizzly bear habitat, National Park Service, BLM, Indian Reservation, state managed lands, all have food storage orders when you're out camping or recreating bear country. Hopefully this video is going to play okay. It's one of the better ones.
Any bear sign all day.
About using bear spray.
Three of us were walking through an old growth lodgepole pine forest, and we were making a ton of noise. We were being very vigilant with our yelling of "Hey bear,"
screaming out, trying to make sure that any animal out there heard us, and we didn't want to mess with it. I heard it first, but maybe the other guys had heard it, and I remember stopping to see if I could hear more, and then I heard a series of curse words from one of my coworkers, and immediately started to hear actually crashing was a lot closer.
Maybe 35 or 40 yards from us, we saw a sow grizzly bear standing on its legs looking towards us, and we could see that she appeared to have a couple young with her. We didn't have very much time to collect ourselves or to group together. As soon as we saw her, she was running at us.
Her cubs stayed back kind of, I don't know, maybe 50 yards away from us, and she continued to charge us. She ran up and maybe came within, I want to say 15 yards, and then spun around and ran back to her cubs.
And we were continuing yelling, "Hey bear, hey bear, it's okay bear," and trying to make her feel comfortable at that time. She did not feel comfortable apparently, because she came back and charged at us again. And you could kind of tell as soon as she started running towards us that it was seemingly going to be different.
The second time she ran at us, she had completely different body language. The first time she kind of just seemed frantic and almost just running out of fear and confusion. And then this time you could tell she was focused.
She was running with her head close to the ground, her ears back. And she singled me out from the three of us and kind of changed course and ran straight at me. So all three of us unloaded our bear spray, and she took 2 steps into the cloud and made a 90-degree turn and then ran out of there.
Carry bear spray.
You never know when you're going to need it.
Don't put it in your backpack. Keep it on the outside. You don't have time to take it out.
Know how to get your bear spray out of your holster. Know how to remove the safety. The scariest thing, you see a bear running at you and you're suddenly fumbling on the side of your pack trying to get your bear spray out of the holster because it's stuck or something. You really want to be well rehearsed.
You can find the video on YouTube if it played jittery on your computer screen. Oops, let me go back over here. One bear safety video that I recommended just came out a month ago and was made public. It was made several years ago, but they just got it on YouTube. And it's called Staying Safe in Bear Country. And I highly recommend it if you're living or recreating bear country. It was put together by bear professionals. It actually has footage from in the field and shows bears' reaction, bear behavior. And so I highly recommend it. Again, it's called Staying Safe in Bear Country, 30 minutes long, and you can get it on YouTube, and it's free now. You used to have to get it on the CDs, but now they have provided it on YouTube. So highly recommend it. So just a few video clips of bears that we've released. These are this is an adult male grizzly that we caught while we were doing some augmentation and population trapping. We were looking for female grizzly bears, so we didn't put a radio collar on him, didn't have to drug him. This is a very typical release. Bear comes out and runs away. We're in the vehicle safely when we release him. The bear, we reset the trap, and the bear actually came back and got caught again a few days later. So we decided to pull out from that area for trapping. We were trapping behind the closed gate, so we had good knowledge of making sure nobody was back there except us. And again, release this bear, honk the horn. We're in the vehicles. We use winches to raise the door and release the bears. And that's the way most of the releases go. They come out, they run away, and that's it. Sometimes it can be a little bit more aggressive bears. Some are a little bit more upset when they come out of their traps. This doesn't happen that often, but this is a big adult male at a different location, and he really didn't care for the trap at all. Gave it some swats, and finally realized that wasn't anything you can do about it, I guess. Give him another swat, and then takes off running when I honk the horn. In that case, I could tell that bear was pretty aggressive in the trap when we caught him. So we hooked up 100 feet of rope to the pulley system and pulled the door open with the truck, and then all I had to do was open my door just a few inches, drop the rope, and the bear ran off. Here's another angle, same bear, same release. Again, a big adult male. We didn't need a drug or radio collar. We just ended up releasing him. And again, this was on a closed road. We know that nobody was up in this area where we released him at. It's right where we actually caught him also. And we have all these areas posted with signs to let people know that we're trapping back behind them. So next objective is to respond to grizzly bear conflicts on private and public lands. And I'm just going to go through on some of the stuff that we end up dealing with. Bears in backyards, bears getting into sheds or buildings. And last year was a fairly typical year. We had a lot of calls, but a lot of those were not confirmed grizzly bear conflicts. 129 out of the over 200 reported conflicts were actually confirmed. And most of them involved the same bears. And they were bears in yards, bears in garbage, bird feeders, some livestock killing. We don't have many bears killing livestock over here. Most of it's chickens, and bears in fruit trees. I've been in this position since 1993, and to give you an idea of it, we've had over 470 captures of over 280 individual grizzly bears. And we average about 17 captures a year for management. And you can see the last 3 years, a little over average. In 2020, we had 19 captures. So what happens with those, what time of year does most of the conflicts occur? Last year it was spring, 13 were spring captures, 1 in the summer. Most times bears are in the huckleberry fields and berry fields in the summer, not a lot of conflicts there usually. And then in the autumn, the bears are coming down into the apple trees. We tend to get more conflicts there. About twice as many females as males that we caught last year in conflict situations. 16 of the 19 were relocated. 3 of them were recaptured up near Stryker and Trigo areas and were euthanized because of repeated conflicts. And 3 of them were not relocated, and I ended up euthanizing them without releasing them or relocating them. Euthanasia, or putting bears down, killing bears, is the last resort. It's the worst part of the job, and we try to do anything we can to avoid having to do that. But in some cases, that's what ended up needing to be happening. So the current status of those grizzly bears, 11 are known to be still alive, 6 were euthanized, 1 was killed illegally. We don't know who ended up killing that bear, still under investigation, and 1 is unknown because the GPS collar we had on it quit working. Living in bear country, a lot of people are seasonal residents, and bears come in and people come back and wonder why the bears are eating the green grass in their yard. And these are bears reacting to a critter getter that I put up in a yard outside of Ferndale, get the bears to move out of the yard. And we just ask people, make bears leave, bang pots and pans, yell at them from a safe distance. We don't recommend shooting to try to scare bears away because you don't know where the bullet's going to go. And we've actually had bears injured and killed by people that said, well, I just shot over their head to chase them away, and actually ended up hitting and killing or injuring the bear. We've had some situations in the North Fork of the Flathead. More people are putting yurts up there. And of course, they're not hard-sided. And so some bears will come in and pull the sides off of the yurts. And so it's important to not store food in there. These people ended up putting electric fence around their yurt. Garbage has to be stored properly or bears will get it. And then also, it's pretty rare for bears in this area to get into cars to get food that's stored in cars. It's more common like at Yosemite National Park, but it does happen up in this area. And so, you know, if you have the ability to store food, excuse me, and not leave it in your car, that's great. You know, if you're staying at a rental cabin or something like that, but, you know, keep it in the trunk or try not to have real smelly foods there that might attract bears. Other types of conflicts, they're really good at finding horse feed, chicken feed, grain, people leaving garbage and freezers on the back porch on the right-hand side. Bears will come and find that and get into it. Don't recommend doing that. The grain I already talked about. Bears, you know, seeking out wheat seed or barley seed and feed on it. This was a little bit unusual. The stat on the left, that's carrots. So we had a grizzly bear family group getting into carrots, and they like carrots. They'll come into gardens and dig them up usually after mid-September. And so people who live in grizzly bear country, I usually try to tell them to get their carrots out of their garden. They don't seem to usually go after other stuff, but definitely carrots in the gardens. And then on the right, that's an apple scat, bear feeding on apples. This was kind of a unique situation. This happened near Columbia Falls. This was a landowner, had grizzly bear tracks go through his backyard with a female with a cub in the neighbor's apple trees. His chickens were electrified, so there wasn't any issue there. But this bear, excuse me, went and day bedded in the trees. And so he took his daughter and his dog for a walk out in his trees and came across these bear tracks and saw where this bear had dug right in here, and he was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, you see the circle over on the right-hand side in that picture. It's the same picture. He didn't realize when he took a picture, there was actually a grizzly bear cub there sitting next to its mother. And he ended up walking up on this log right here to the right. And right then she rushed at him, charged at him. He let go of the dog leash. He had bear spray with him. He actually sprayed her and hit her, and she turned and left. And he turned immediately, grabbed his daughter, and went back to the house, and no further incidents. We actually went and trapped for that bear, and we actually caught that female and her cub, relocated them out of that area. And when we were working the female up, I started really coughing badly. And it turns out it was from the bear spray. It was still bear spray residue that was still on her, was causing me to cough. And we actually noticed when we drugged her that she had some heavy breathing and was making some noise when she was breathing. And of course, again, that was from the bear spray. But we released them, and they are now denned up actually in Glacier Park. So other types of conflicts, bears like chickens, and a lot of people like to raise chickens. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to be in bear country, you need to protect them with electric fencing. And like I said, Defenders of Wildlife has a good electric fencing program They'll cost share 50% of the cost of electric fence up to $500. And you can get a, like I said, contact them on their Defenders of Wildlife webpage in Missoula. This year, we actually had a couple of pigs that were killed by grizzly bears up out of the Columbia Falls area and the Whitefish area. Again, electric fencing works really well, protecting your livestock, your pigs, your sheep, your goats, and your chickens. And our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website and the Interagency Grizzly Bear website has information on how to properly construct and maintain electric fence to keep bears out. Another thing that we want to do is develop relationships with landowners, the public, and agency personnel on improving trust, coexistence, and tolerance. And I put this picture in here because this is a young female grizzly bear that we caught and we were radio collaring. My supervisor is Jim Williams in the red shirt, but the men that are there also, the man in the white, light colored blue shirt and the cowboy hat, he is the owner of Southern Pine Plantations. And if you're aware of it, Southern Pines Plantation purchased all the Weyerhaeuser property basically west of Kalispell. It used to be Plum Creek property. He sold some of that off to a couple other big landowners, but he kept some of it, and we invited him to watch us work up a grizzly bear. He's from Georgia, had never been around grizzly bears, never seen them. Some of the property they bought is important grizzly bear country habitat. And so we wanted to just connect him with, you know, seeing a bear, knowing what grizzly bears were like in a good, safe situation. And he still talks about it, evidently. And it resulted in, we think, him putting a conservation easement on a big chunk of that land north of Lost Trail out there with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So again, sometimes, you know, just getting people involved, getting them to understand bears and get in a connection with them can have some big dividends in the long run for conservation. And then it's really important to develop relationships, I think, with the landowners. You know, when we catch bear on somebody's property, I like to try to have them help us out and work with us. It was kind of hard to do this year with the COVID, but, you know, we tried to involve the landowners so they have more of a connection with the bears. And then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, law enforcement, we got them involved. And again, Anders on the right-hand side, he was actually attacked by the grizzly bear I mentioned, and we got him involved. So he had more of a positive experience. And one of the benefits of that is landowners, there's a lot of people with trail cameras out there right now. And some people get excellent footage of, you know, grizzly bears. And in this case, it's a female with a cub on the east side of the Flathead Valley. And this landowner sent me that video so we could actually document, because we're trying to keep track of females with cubs and where their habitat they're occupying. Rub tree on the right-hand side, there's people that actually have rub trees on their property and they actually collect grizzly bear hair for us. We can send in for DNA to identify individuals. So just, you know, working with landowners, getting to know people has really paid good dividends for us in terms of developing those relationships. And we do a lot of work with some of the NGOs like Swan Valley Bear Resources out of Condon. We put on bear fairs. We didn't do any last year or this year, but we've done them in the past down at Condon, up at Essex, Pole Bridge, and we want to do Whitefish in Eureka also in the future. And it's just an opportunity for people to learn more about bears, similar to the presentation that we're doing tonight. So because we're Whitefish Legacy partners, I put together this map. This is Whitefish Lake, and these are all the grizzly bear capture locations that I've had in and around Whitefish since 1993. So you can see we've actually free-range grizzly bears on City Beach in Whitefish. We've caught grizzly bears right next to Whitefish Lake Lodge. So bears are around. And if I put black bears on here, Eric Wenham does our black bear management, it would probably fill this whole circle in. This is a 5-mile radius around Whitefish. If we add grizzly bear locations to that, these are radio locations from radio collared grizzly bears. Each color is a different grizzly bear, and the blue purple colors are females and the red and orange are males. But you can see that, you know, grizzly bears do use areas in and around whitefish, and for the most part don't cause any conflict. And but people just need to be aware that they are around. And if we expand that out to a 10-mile radius around whitefish and start going all the way over towards Columbia Falls, up north of Big Mountain and up the Stillwater drainage over here, there's Tally Lake, and even down towards Happy Valley, you can see that there's a fair amount of grizzly bear radio locations. And some of these radio locations are gotten we get a location every 30 minutes. And so that gives you an idea, you know, how much time bears can spend in these certain areas. And most people don't even see the bears. They don't know they're around. They're not causing conflicts, but just want to make people aware of it. With that, I'd like to acknowledge I have volunteers that help me out. Like I said, last year was a little bit more difficult because we had to wear masks. We even wore masks when we were working the bears up. And with that, I'll open it up. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Oh, I think you're
Okay.
muted.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm muted. So thanks. We did have some questions come in. We have I think a handful already. And then it looks like there's some more as they come. So I'm going to go back. And I think one of the first ones that we didn't get to was someone wanted to know exactly what bear spray does to a bear. Does it inhibit their sight, their breathing?
Well, grizzly bears have a very good sense of smell, much better than any dogs. And so it was designed basically to go into their eyes, but also into their nose. And so it inhibits, I think, it makes it very hard to breathe, and also probably stings their eyes. I've had it, you know, go off and spray me, and it, you know, it's very uncomfortable. And the reactions of bears that have been sprayed by bear spray is to turn and run and leave. And it works most of the time. The people that I've talked to have even turned females with cubs at close range, female with cubs that were charging at very close range, and actually had the bears turn and leave.
Great, thank you for that. Quick question about cubs of black bear and grizzly bears. Are they distinguishable? Do they have the same distinguishing features as the adult?
I would say that when they're first come out of the den, that can be a little difficult to tell the difference. But by and large, you know, after they're out of the den for a month or two, they look like miniature grizzly bears. Grizzly bears look like miniature grizzly bears, really. And I don't know if you saw in some of the pictures, you know, you could see that they even have little shoulder humps, and their claws are starting to be long. They're not really sharp curved claws like black bears. One thing people wonder about is they say, well, you know, black bears can climb trees, but grizzly bears can't. Grizzlies can actually climb trees quite well if they want to. They're just not as good at doing it as black bears are. But we've seen adult male grizzly bears up lodgepole pines without any branches, 20, 30 feet up a tree. So they can climb trees if they want to. They're just not as good.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And how large is an individual grizzly bear's territory?
Well, it depends on the food resources for that. We have grizzly bears in Glacier Park that have home ranges that are fairly small because it's really rich in foods there. The avalanche chutes, the berry fields, home ranges might be 50 square miles there. Over on the Rocky Mountain front, female home ranges where it's a drier habitat might be 150 square miles. In the South Fork of the Flathead, it's about 100 square miles. And then for male grizzly bears, we have home ranges that are 500 to 800 square miles. So they can cover a lot of ground.
Great, let's see. Someone was interested in knowing if there was a map showing the Swan area. Is there a place where there's more maps for different regions of
Yeah, Swan Valley. Yeah, we have Swan Valley connections down the Swan Valley. They may have a map on their website that we've provided them in the past that shows grizzly bear radio locations down there. It's kind of at a like a map I showed you, kind of, it's not at a very distinct level. You can't really pinpoint people's property, but it gives you an idea, how much bear activity, or at least radio locations, radio collared bears there are down there.
Okay. Are some bear spray, are there any types of bear sprays that are better than other types?
Well, as an employee of Fish Wildlife Parks, I'm not supposed to product endorse, but I will tell you, I carry Counter Assault. It was the first one that was developed. It's made locally in Kalispell. It's been tested on bears when Kerry Hunt originally developed it in coordination with Chung Jonko and Bill Pounds back in the 80s. And the other one that people do carry is UDAP. You want to make sure they're EPA approved. Both Counter Assault and UDAP are EPA approved. And then it's just a matter of preference in terms of what people want to carry. But there are bear sprays that are made that are not EPA approved. And so I would stay away from those, or they haven't been tested on bears either.
That's actually a longer answer than I thought would be for that. I never thought about that. So that's good information. What's the black bear population? Do you know? Someone asked, noting our grizzly population is around 1,100.
Rick Mace, who I mentioned earlier, he did a population study on black bears in Northwest Montana, and it really varies throughout the area. And they also, in Glacier Park, looked at the DNA hairs that they got from black bears in the park. And I think that you can basically say it's at least 3 times as many black bears as there are grizzly bears. In some areas in the Swan, they estimated the density of black bears was 1 black bear per square mile down in the Swan Valley in places. I don't know if that's still true now as it was back in the early 90s, late 90s, but it was at one time that Rick came up with that as a population or density estimate in the Swan.
Okay, thank you. Here's a fun one from John. Do you name bears?
Well, we're not supposed to, but we do. When you catch hundreds of grizzly bears, we microchip the bears that we capture with a small microchip. You can't radio track from it, but we use it for identification, same as they use in your dog and your cat or your horses for identification. But it's a 9-digit number. So it's like trying to remember, social security number. You're not going to remember, a lot of those. So we give place names usually to bears. Like if we catch a bear at Essex, we may call it the Essex bear, or we catch a bear in Ferndale, we call it the Ferndale female. And, so we do name bears. We don't make those public in terms of trying to put it out in press releases, things like that. But for our own use, we go ahead and name them so we can kind of keep tabs on them. It means a lot more. And then for the landowners at times too, because if I say Dakota, which is a bear we caught on Dakota Avenue back in Whitefish, we actually caught her several times in Whitefish and we named her Dakota. People still ask me what happened to Dakota. Unfortunately, she was shot and killed illegally. Her collar was thrown into the Stillwater River. We retrieved it. But people relate to Dakota. They don't relate to a bear number. So we do use them, but not in a big public way.
Great answer. Do bears use the same den each year?
If it's a natural den, yes, they can. We had a female that we caught in the North Fork that denned up above Longbow Lake, and she did use the same natural rock cave a couple of years in a row. Most of the bears, since they dig their dens, they collapse over the course of the summer, and so they'll dig a new one. And sometimes they'll dig one close to the other den, and other times they'll be 5 miles away.
Okay, and another question, how big do grizzly bears get around this area, height and weight?
Well, in terms of weight, we have better information on that. They're not, everybody thinks grizzly bears weigh like 1,000 pounds. They don't. Those are the big coastal brown bears or Kodiak bears where they get really big. Or we do have some grizzlies on the Rocky Mountain front that, they caught in the spring that were 800-pound males. Over here, I would say the biggest one that I've caught was about 700 pounds in the fall, and that was a male. most of our grizzly bears, the females, adult female grizzly bears in the spring are 200 pounds to 250, 275 pounds in the spring. In the fall, they'll be 350 up to maybe 400 pounds. And then adult males in the spring, you know, adults are over 6 years of age usually. They'll be 350 pounds in the spring and maybe 400 pounds, and in the fall, maybe 500 pounds, 600 pounds in the fall. Depends on the food source.
Okay, thank you. Question about, let me see what's next. Did you have any involvement with the Smith Lake grizzly attack on Halloween last year? And if so, any thoughts?
The Smith Lake Halloween, no. I'm not aware of a Smith Lake grizzly bear attack at Halloween. Over west of Kalispell, I assume is what they're talking about.
Tim, I think he's referring to the one north of Whitefish Lake on the near the Old
that
King
one.
Creek Road.
That Smith Lake, yeah. Oh, that was the hunter with his son. Yeah, I didn't get involved with that. I was aware of it. I was thinking Smith Lake west of Kalispell. But yeah, that was man and his son hunting. And it was a female with 2 cubs a year, unmarked bear. She was feeding on a dead deer that was along the road, closed road. And unfortunately, they both, the son and the father, were seriously injured, have recovered from what I understand. And he did shoot and kill the adult female. And the decision was made to leave the 2 cubs in the wild to fend for themselves. We've actually found that cubs that we leave in the wild after September, if they're in good physical shape, they'll actually den on their own and survive. And I've actually radio collared 2 female orphan cubs, grizzly bear cubs, and released them into the wild, and both of them ended up denning successfully. And the second one actually denned as a yearling also. The first one ended up being killed by something when she came out of the den, either another bear or mountain lion. We don't know what killed it. But this other female, orphan female grizzly bear cub, she's in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and she denned as a cub of the year by herself, and then she denned again this last winter as a yearling. And I'm going to drop a radio collar this spring when she comes out of her den, so it doesn't get too tight. But that's why we left those 2 cubs up on above Smith Lake to fend for themselves. Because our options, if we take them into captivity, we have to place them into the zoo, or we have to put them down. And I would rather have them stay in the wild and have a chance to make it on their own.
Okay, thanks for that question. Question from Jessica. If a female bear, either grizzly or black, becomes pregnant before denning, is it guaranteed she will have birth in the den?
Well, bears are very interesting. They breed in, the spring, May, June, July, and they have what's called delayed implantation. So the eggs will get fertilized and they'll stay in suspension. And if she's in really good physical shape, just before denning, they'll implant in the uterine wall, and she'll actually produce clubs. And they, down at Washington State University, on captive bears, they found that the female body fat has to at least be over 25%, I believe it is, in order for them to actually be able to produce cubs. If not, they'll abort those blastocysts and they won't implant in the uterine wall and they won't have cubs. So there's a very short gestation period. So really, gestation for them is from essentially the end of October, first part of November, until the end of January when they have cubs in the den. That's why the cubs are, less than a pound when they're born in the den.
So interesting. Okay, another question from George. Do you catch people who kill them illegally, and what happens to them?
Well, I'm not a warden, but we do have wardens that do investigate, and we have caught people that kill bears illegally. And actually, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service special agents, because they're a listed species under the Endangered Species Act, they basically usually take over the investigations. And they have caught people that have killed grizzlies illegally and have fined them. And if somebody mistakenly kills a grizzly bear during black bear season, it was a mistake. They turn themselves in. They may get a fine, $1,000, $500, $2,000. But if what I've seen is if people kill a grizzly illegally and try to hide it, the wardens don't like that. And if they can figure out who did it, those people do get the big fines, $8,000, $10,000 fines for illegally killing grizzly bears. And it could be more than that.
Okay, a silly question from Carl. Are you sitting on a bearskin sofa?
No, I don't have any bear skin. No.
John wants to know, what do the numbers need to be to get grizzlies off the endangered list?
Well, we think we're there right now for the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. We think we're there for the Yellowstone ecosystem. Unfortunately, they did get put back on the list in the Yellowstone. There's some big questions that still need to be answered down there. We think that we've met the recovery goals in the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, and it's going to be probably more of a legal and political decision as to whether they get delisted. But that's the goal. That's what we're working toward. So we can delist in those ecosystems and put our efforts into management in the other ecosystems like the North Cascades, the Selwyn Bitterroots, perhaps. That's a recovery area in the Bitterroots, and also over in the Cabinet Yaak and the Selkirks.
Okay, a question from Fred. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. It asks, do you work with Carolean dogs now?
Carolean bear dogs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Carolean bear dogs. I
Gotcha.
started with Carolean bear dogs in 95 and 96. I've had 4 of them over the years. We used them in management, and they were great partners. Last Carolean bear dog died basically about 2 years ago or so, and he was 16 years old. All of mine died of old age. One did have leukemia, but yeah, they were great tools. I don't have any more because I'm probably getting close to retiring. And I don't think anybody, Mike Nadel had some over on the Rocky Mountain front, but he's retired now. So they do still use them in Washington, Canada, Alaska, in bear management. But right now in Montana, we don't have anybody using them.
Great. Sorry, I didn't understand that at first. Got it now. So the last question we have right now is, I'm going to kind of summarize it, that are you working with any realtors or any situations like that where we have a big influx of people moving in without bear awareness to sort of spread that knowledge to all the new people moving in? And is it causing more conflicts or calls for you?
Well, that's a great question. And that's something we talk about a lot, is how do we reach the new people that are moving in, because there's a lot of influx. We do public service announcements, we do press releases, we do presentations like this, try to get the message and the word out. We've done education in schools. It just can be very difficult. We tried to, at one time, to try to get a realtor disclosure thing put into place, that if people were moving into, areas with wildlife, not just grizzly bears, but elk and deer and whatnot, to let people know that. Because I've had a lot of people that have come into the area that had a grizzly bear show up at their place and say, I didn't even have a clue that there were grizzly bears in this area. And they were in the North Fork of the Flathead or down in the Swan, where we live here, we know there's bears there. But these people had no clue. And so, it's something that, we've talked about. And, if anybody has any good ideas how to reach those people, we talked about doing, like welcome brochures, that kind of stuff. Welcome to the neighborhood. Here's the kind of critters that you might encounter or something like that. So it's a challenge because there's a lot of turnover, a lot of new people coming into the area, and a lot of people don't have any idea.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. If someone shoots and kills a bear through self-defense, is that considered an offense?
No, I've never known anybody to be charged for killing a bear in self-defense if they could show it was self-defense. We have had people that have shot bears claim self-defense, and when the warden skinned the bear out, they found that it was shot in the rear end. that was running away. And so, you know, if you shoot a bear, it's legal to shoot a grizzly bear in defense of yourself or defense of somebody else. In the state of Montana, it's illegal to kill a grizzly bear if, by state law, if it's in the act of killing your livestock. Federal law, it's not legal to do that. So the state may not charge you, but the federal government could charge you for killing a bear if it's killing your livestock. So really what I tell people, it's only legal for self-defense. And like I said, I know several situations where people have killed grizzlies in self-defense and they were not charged.
Okay. I'm going to take this one. It asks, see, Cecilia asks, what's the name again of the agency to get in touch with for fencing for pigs and chickens?
Sure. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of names. There's Defenders of Wildlife, and that's a nonprofit organization. They're out of Missoula. You can go on their website, and basically they will cost share 50% up to $500 on electric fencing. Another agency you can contact is the Wildlife Services. They're with the Department of Agriculture, and I think you can get their address on the Interagency Grizzly Bear website, IGBC website. But they've got a program where they'll help with some of the costs of fencing, electric fencing, primarily just for livestock though. And then there's another organization called People and Carnivores, and Bryce Andrews is based out of the Mission Valley, and they will work with people on electric fencing. And then also our department, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, you can contact us at Region 1, and we've helped people with designing, putting up electric fence. We can't do a lot of the labor, but we can help people do, you know, design it and show them how to do it and maintain it so it's done properly.
Great. Well, this has been so amazing, and we are so thankful to have you here tonight, Tim. Yeah, and you've got a lot of comments coming in, thank yous and awesomes. And how about we end with this last question? We just got one last one. John asks, how would you summarize the future of bears in Montana?
Well, I would say the future of grizzly bears in Montana, I hope is a bright one. I think a lot of people are concerned about grizzly bears and want to see grizzly bears remain on the landscape. I think that it's going to be a big social issue and probably a political issue, as we're going to see. We've seen kind of in the legislature some of the proposed bills that are coming out right now. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think by and large, we've done some good things in terms of protecting important grizzly bear habitat. Glacier Park and Yellowstone are big reservoirs for bears, and the big wilderness areas, you know, have good secure habitat for bears. And I think a lot of it is just people being willing to coexist and tolerate grizzly bears, and our department being responsive to concerns and conflicts when they occur, and working with people to resolve conflicts when they occur. So I think, you know, next 30, 40, 50 years, I think grizzly bears will be fine. The question is what's going to happen when, you know, the population of the Flathead Valley triples. And that's going to be a big question as to whether people are going to tolerate bears.
All right. Well, when you're on the Whitefish Trail, make sure you use all this information and knowledge. And we do plan, we've recorded this tonight, everyone. So once we get it up on our website and make it available, please share it with your friends and family and community so that they can be aware of what they can do as well to coexist. And again, Tim, we are so thankful to have you. And again, we're a partner. Tim works for the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Game, and this was brought to you tonight by Whitefish Legacy Partners. So check us out at www.whitefishlegacy.org if you want to learn more, and please be safe out there in bear country. And thanks, Tim.
You're welcome.
We
Thanks.
appreciate you.
And feel free to contact me if people have questions. look me up on Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website or call Region 1 Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Okay, I was gonna say I could type in I could type in something if you had an email address or anything to share with.
Oh, yeah, you could, my email is tmanley, M-A-N-L-E-Y, T-M-A-N-L-E-Y, @mt.gov. And a work cell phone, I can give that.
We can we can just leave your email, and then if you, yeah, we'll just do that. So you don't get,
People need to get in touch with me, that they can do that. And if you have
Great.
conflicts, don't wait for things to get really bad. Call us ahead of time before it gets too bad.
perfect. Thanks so much.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
that.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, thanks for supporting us, and we hope you have a great spring season, summer season, fall season, and be safe out there.